recording. Okay. Welcome to session number 23 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. And we've been doing a study through the entire Bible and theology syllabus here for about 2019 is when we started. 2020 is when we started. So we're coming up on 5 years. It's about 4 years of study. And this has copies on Facebook and on YouTube. We appreciate those who follow online when the rest of us have gone to bed. It's a real privilege to be a part of this. Today we're going to follow up on Abraham, who in chapter 22 does the famous sacrifice of Isaac. This is a very big deal. And Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac is a real thing, even though Isaac didn't die. And it's a good thing that Isaac didn't die. But it's, oh my goodness, where, and my Bible is there. Okay. Um, Abraham showed the willingness by faith, and Isaac did at the same time, to follow God's directions, even though it was almost nonsensical. Abraham's faith is demonstrated to be very strong, and we must never discount Isaac. Isaac is a type of Christ in that sense, and that voluntary following of his dad up onto the mountain, even though he knew what was coming down, is an extraordinarily important thing. What Isaac did there is, from the rest of our study in Genesis, going to turn out to be the most important thing he did in his whole life. That is his high point, and it's a very good one. If that's the high point of anybody's life, that was a good high point. So I'm not criticizing Isaac. But he is, in that sense, a transitional character. So we get a good long story about Abraham, and then just this quick story about Isaac, and that sacrifice was the high point. Jacob, on the other hand, gets a long story. We hear about Jacob for the whole rest of the book of Genesis. Jacob is the father of 12 tribes, the 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. So Jacob is an essential in all of this. Joseph is merely one of the sons of Jacob. The messianic line will go through Jacob. So really the patriarchs are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph is just one of the boys. And his story is fascinating. Joseph's story is very important for us on a number of levels, and it shows the transition from the slavery in Egypt to the freedom later. The Joseph story is necessary to understand Exodus and how that works out. So Joseph is not an afterthought. Joseph is important, but we won't call him one of the patriarchs in exactly the same way. And in fact, Joseph doesn't end up in the so-called tomb of the patriarchs, which we're going to see in the next slide. I think, it has come unshared again. Right? I'm going to get over to the share screen so that we can go on with that. Share, and there it is. Okay, and I should be able to make that come up as the presenter view. Yes. Is it? Yes, it is. And it's working over there and it's working here. Okay. This structure is found in modern Hebron. And I'm down close to the street that goes past and have walked up a set of very broad staircase steps leading up toward the the building that Herod the Great built over the top of the cave of the patriarchs and the tomb of the patriarchs. Yeah. Uh, so we've got that going on here. Let me make sure that I am in fact recording. Yes, I am in fact recording. Donna just asked, so I thought, well, I better check, make sure I'm recording. Sorry about that for those of you watching the later on the tape. Okay, so what we see going on in chapter 13 of Genesis, and I need to get there, uh, is this story of first of all Abraham and the Philistines. And then we've got okay, 14. You know, I hate it when I don't have quite enough time to get all my stuff together. Everything has to be turned on, and I don't want it to sit and go bad on me. So we're in chapter 23 of Genesis, and we see the report here of Sarah's death. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiryat Arba, which is literally the village of somebody by the name of Arba. Okay, Kiryat Arba simply means that Kiryat Sefer, house of the book, village of the book, that kind of thing. That is Hebron. So the name Kiryat Arba uh, was changed to Hebron, which is based on the same root word Arba, and that's where the modern name Hebron comes from. Uh, and this biblical name of Hebron is still the name that the city is called today. It's called Hebron in Arabic, Hebron, but it's same name. Uh, and the Muslims who live there, most of the city of Hebron today is Muslim, uh, admit that this is the cave of the patriarchs. They know what this place is, and yet they claim it as one of their most holy places. When in fact, this is the cave of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their wives, and some of Jacob's concubines that were here. This is a really important place in Judaism. It's not so important for Christians, although Abraham is our father according to the faith, and so the tomb of Abraham is an important place to Christians. Abraham was the father of Ishmael, who is one of the progenitors of the mixed nationality that we call Arabs. And he's not even the mixed father of everybody we call Muslim. There are lots of Muslims who are not Arabs. Uh, so there's a broader Muslim uh, world that says the Cave of Hebron is a holy place for us because Abraham was the father of Ishmael. And Ishmael is not in this cave. We don't know where Ishmael's tomb might be, and it's not venerated. But they want this place. So you'll see in this photograph, the Herodian stones are all the big limestone blocks that make up to build this wall. They're in the middle of this picture, going all the way to the underside of the S in Sarah, is the minaret of the mosque that Muslims built here in the 7th century. When they took Jerusalem, they also moved out into the countryside and took other places that they determined were holy for life of Muhammad or for the Muslim religion. And one of the things they built was this mosque over the top of the structure, the holy place structure that Herod built at about the time of Christ over the tomb of the patriarchs. The the tomb is actually a cave, and it's entered inside this building. There's a way to look into it. There's a small hole in the rock where you can look in, but it's dark and there's nothing to see really. Uh, Visitors are not allowed into the actual tomb of the patriarchs today, and nobody has been in there that I've seen recorded since 1967. A character, quite the character, Yigal Yadin, an Israeli archaeologist, one of the more important masters of archaeology. His doctorate from someplace important. I think he did his work in Britain at Oxford or someplace important outside of Israel. Came to Israel and helped to lay the foundations for archaeology in Israel, and trained a whole generation of young scholars who are the archaeologists in Israel today. So very important guy. He was also a reservist in the Israeli army. He was a colonel or something important in the Israeli Defense Forces. And he was a part uh, of the military movement that went through Hebron in the Six Day War, 1967. He was riding in actually a British half track. We call it an armored personnel carrier, but it was just a big truck with tracks on the back. Uh, he and his command staff were in this half track, and they pulled all the way up onto the steps, and about the place where I'm standing here. Yadin went on into the mosque as it was then and pulled open the stone cover from the hole that goes down into the cave of the patriarchs. And he realized immediately that it was too small for him or any of his other people to go down into. And there were still snipers, there was still artillery fire coming into Hebron. And Yadin went back out to the half track and patched through on the radio network to his office in Tel Aviv, and found the location of an Israeli corporal, a young woman who was his favorite photographer for archaeology. And they got together, and she got orders to come very quickly from the headquarters in Tel Aviv, bring a Jeep, bring your photography equipment, small equipment that you can get down into this hole. And she is the only person that we know of who went down into the cave of the patriarch. She took lighting down there, used her cameras, and was able to get the only photographs that we have of the interior of the cave of the patriarchs. And there are big stone, what are called cenotaphs, that cover the tomb, that cover the remains of the patriarchs and their wives. So that's all there, and that's all real, and that dates back a long, long time. That cave itself and the small field that surrounded the cave is the only real estate acquisition that Abraham ever had in Canaan. That was God promised that the whole land would be for Israel, and yet the only thing that Abraham ever lived with or ever owned was this one little piece of ground. And so we see the business transaction, and it's uh, just a little opening into an ancient world. Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her, which is the tradition. Some in the West, a funeral gets over with very quickly, and it's all done. I like the tradition in the Philippines where the mourning goes on for a while. I think that's exciting. That's neat. It's fun to come and preach at funerals, and I don't know if they did that in the Old Testament. Probably not. But Abraham rose up to mourn his dead, and he said to the Hittites. Now, the Hittites would have been one of a wide variety of people who lived in Israel at this time. They were eventually one of the nations who were driven out of the Promised Land. Well, that wouldn't be for another 400 years later, and the Hittites were living there. And uh, Hittites are an interesting people group. For the longest time, the critics of the Old Testament have told us that their assured results of very important scholarship demonstrate that there have never been any Hittites in then, and it's been about 100 years now, so the critics don't have a lot to talk about anymore. But archaeologists digging in Turkey found the Hittite Empire. Just huge empire, lasted from about 2200 BC down to about 1200 BC, so roughly 1,000 years. There was a Hittite, not really an empire, but there were a bunch of Hittites around. Their capital was a place called Bagaskoi, and there was a place called Hattusa. There's a lot of important cities. They had an entire culture, and those people were actually deposed and stopped being a force in history when the progenitors of the Philistines came through, a group called the Sea Peoples around 1200 BC or perhaps a little earlier, migrated into what is today Turkey and displaced uh, the governing powers of the Hittites. They staged a revolution or a coup or just a hostile takeover, and they took over the Hittite Empire, and that dropped out of history for a long, long time. We don't see Turkey rising back to any kind of significance until really the Persian era, and then it was part of Persia. So the Hittites, very interesting, very historical people. They are not a persistent enemy of Israel. There were Hittites who were part of David's uh, entourage. His 30 mighty men include at least one Hittite, a fellow by the name of Uriah, who was the husband of Bathsheba, and all that famous story that happens later. But Uriah the Hittite was a loyal follower of David and very likely a believer, uh, and yet a Hittite. So the Hittites are not one of the enemies of Israel. And we see Hittites continuing to live in Israel after the conquest. We don't know exactly what happened to all of them. We do know that there was a Canaanite ruling in Hebron at the time of the conquest. So there are a lot of questions, but the Hittites are pretty good people. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I'm a sojourner and a foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Okay, so Abraham would like a piece of ground for a tomb. In the uh, in the ancient world, burial could take place above ground or below ground. If you were going to do this above ground, you would need to build some kind of a tomb building. If there was a cave available, that was quicker and easier. So caves were fairly commonly used as tombs. Typically, what will happen The body will be placed on a shelf of stone within the tomb, wrapped in the grave clothes, and then placed on a sometimes a pedestal within the tomb, sometimes just on a shelf cut into one side of the tomb. In Hebron, we have layers of limestone and chalk. So caves are typically chalk caves that are available. That's what we see here. It's a fairly large area, and Abraham bought the whole cave and would have laid Sarah's remains on a shelf in the cave. He would have come back 1 to 2 years later to that same cave and would have taken Sarah's bones and put them into a small box called an ossuary. They make a box out of stone, limestone, and put the bones inside there, and then that box is the permanent resting place for the bones of the deceased. So it's a process that requires a permanent place where you can come back. This also suggests that Abraham didn't have any place else. There was no place he could call his own. On the east side of the Dead Sea, there's a very, very large cemetery that was apparently used by Bedouin. And some of the caves go all the way back into biblical times. And it's interesting that Abraham didn't want to participate in that, perhaps because there were just a wide variety of people groups who were there. He chose to have a place of his own. And so Hebron is extremely important in the Abrahamic narrative. This becomes a place with a permanent right of return because Abraham has buried Sarah here. Later on, the others were buried there. So he says, I'm a sojourner, foreigner, give me property as a burying place, may bury my dead out of my sight. And the Hittites answered Abraham, hear us, my lord, you are a prince of God among us. A technical term there. You are obviously a godly man, and you are also a powerful man among us. So we will go along with you. We'll cooperate. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. This is actually a very nice thing for the Hittites to say. And Abraham rose, bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, and he said to them, if you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me Ephron the son of Zohar, a specific man, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. Now, in this discussion, it sounds fairly straightforward in English, and I know it does in Tagalog as well, or in Italian. It sounds very straightforward, not very technical. There are lots and lots and lots of uh, ancient Near Eastern technical terms. I'm not going to run through all of them, but this is real estate terminology. The owner is identified, the specific cave is identified, the ownership is identified, and there are technical terms for all of this. It is at the end of his field that specifies the precise location of this cave. So you could look through the Hittite records of that time, if they still existed, and find the cave of Machpelah in the end of the field of Ephron the Hittite. It would be listed in the stone tablets that make up the records, the real estate records of that area. Of course, it doesn't anymore. But Abraham was he was making a business arrangement, and so talk to Ephron and see if he won't sell me. He says for the full price. let him sell me and thus convey to me as property in your presence as witnesses this property. The term means real property or real estate as a burying place. He shows the purpose of it. This is not going to be a place I live. This will be a place that I return to from time to time, and it will be my property for the memorial of my dead. So Ephron, the Hittite, happened to be sitting amongst the Hittites. Abraham would have gone to the city gate of whatever encampment or village there was here. And he was sitting there, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites. Technical term, he's giving a legal statement. He says to them, in the hearing of all who went in at the gate of the city, "No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field. Literally, I transfer, I convey the field to you, and I convey to you the cave that is in it." Specific legal terminology. So I give it to you in the sight, that is, with witnesses of the sons of my people, I convey it to you. I give it to you. So bury your dead. So Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. Now Ephron has just offered to give it to him. Did he really mean that? Okay. I, he might have. It might have been a thing, but Abraham is going to insist. He says, "But if you will hear me, I give you the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I might bury my dead there." Okay, this is a very uh, courteous way of saying, "I'm willing to pay the full price for your field. I'm not asking you to bargain on this. I'll pay the price. You just tell me." Uh, and Ephron answered Abraham, said, "My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead." Now, what Ephron was actually doing was telling Ephron, or telling Abraham, the price of the field. And at this point in a normal negotiation, Abraham would have said, "Oh, my lord Ephron, surely your price is just, and an honest man would be happy to pay the price that you ask. However, I can't meet your price. I have to make a counteroffer of whatever." And then they would have haggled. They would finally have come to a price. Ephron's price was actually, probably, very likely, twice the value of the actual property. That's the usual starting point. If I go into a shop in the old city of Jerusalem and I'm looking at a piece of pottery, for example, and the man says, "Oh, a piece of chocolate on white from the Middle Bronze Age, guaranteed to have come from the city of Hebron, is worth 1,000 shekels. But what is a price like that between you and me?" Okay. And my response would be, "Oh, my good friend, thank you for offering me this wonderful piece of property at that price. Alas, I cannot possibly offer such a princely sum. I offer you the amount of 250 shekels of silver." And the haggling would go on from there. We'd agree at 500. That's that's how it works every time, and you can kind of count on it. It's part of the fun of shopping in Israel, and the Hittites would have done exactly the same thing. So we can assume that Abraham is making a point here. The land is worth to him the full price that is asked. And Abraham listened. He heard him literally. And Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named. There were no coins in this day. And so pieces of silver could be different sizes. So you'd weigh them out. And he weighed out the 400 shekels of silver. A shekel of silver at this time in history was worth roughly a day's wages. So this is a lot of money for a field with a cave in it. It's actually quite a high price. And Abraham could do that. He had the money available, and he weighed out the price named in the hearing of the Hittites. So the witnesses were there, 400 shekels of silver according to the weight current among the merchants. So he said, "We'll use your weights here. Get me a shekel scale, and let's weigh this out into your scale, so you know that the weight is honest." And so Abraham has gone to every possible effort to make sure that everything is honorable, that everything is legal, that everything is clear, and that the entire transaction is above board, right out in the open, up on top of the table, with nothing underhanded going on. He hasn't threatened Ephron with death if he doesn't give him the land. Everything is above board, and everything appears to be done by honorable men who are in a position to make these kinds of decisions. So, what I'm making a big point here: the land in Hebron was Abraham's property. This was his real estate transaction. He he bought the land and paid for it here, and so it is his. And later conquerors who've gone into this place, like Herod, when the Romans took this place. Herod is the one who built on top of that a Roman monument, in honor of the Jewish tradition, but they built a Roman monument over the top of the cave. They had no right to do that. Their right of ownership was by conquest, not by purchase. So Abraham, to this day, still owns that land. The Muslims have no right to build a mosque over that land. That I consider a desecration of a holy place. Uh, and actually, Herod's construction would have been as well. Be that all as it may, modern Jews, ever since 1967, have maintained a presence in Hebron. They call their section of the town a very small area surrounded by walls and guarded by Israeli soldiers, Kiryat Arba, which was the original name for the city of Hebron. I think that's just wonderful. I think that's great. That's what they should have done. So so the deed is done, and the verse 17. So the field of Hebron, or the field of Ephron and Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout the whole area, was made over. The deed was signed. It was recorded amongst the Hittites to Abram as a possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. That whole chapter is essentially the legal description of the property and the legal paperwork for the conveyance of the property into the hand of Abraham. There is no later competing deed of any sort, if I were to do a title search today on the field of Machpelah and the cave, there would be no competing title. This is not in any dispute at all anywhere, except the Muslims came in and say, we want it, so we're going to take it. And I don't consider that legal ownership of anything. Okay, that's that whole thing. And I have some uh, strong feelings about this. Uh, for for Islam in particular, the cave never had any significance at all for Islam. Islam didn't exist for 2.5 millennia after the time of Abraham and Sarah. But Muslims demanded that the world recognize their right to call this a holy place. And it's a flashpoint. The Israelis who live there are very brave people. They're conservative Jews who believe that the Holy Land is in fact their place and belongs to them. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. What am I doing here? We're talking about a bride for Isaac. This is chapter 24. Again, a very, very pretty story. It's a nice story. Uh, when preaching this, a lot of people like to make the comparison between Isaac and Christ, because Isaac is in fact a type of Christ when he's sacrificed there, and Rebecca, his bride, as the bride of Christ, and I think that's perfectly fair. People who like to do that, they're not stretching things too far. That's kind of cute. I'm going to do a little more than that. I want to look at how this actually works out. So, chapter 24. Abram's old, well advanced in years. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham told his serpent, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. Okay, so I'm going to sit on your hand here. A strange thing. We have evidence of this particular tradition back in Mesopotamia of confirming an oath by placing the hand under the thigh. And outside of the Mesopotamian quote, we have no other ancient evidence that this is something that happened. So it may be strictly an Amorite thing that's just a part of Abraham's tradition. At any rate, he's getting him to swear. And this is a fairly important servant within the household. This servant within his household is not a horribly tortured chattel slave. This is a very honored character, the oldest of the household who had charge over the whole household of Abraham. Very important character. This may be Ephraim, the whatever, the I've forgotten now. But this may be that, or Eliezer of Damascus, that's his name, who was the servant that Abraham thought would have to inherit his household. So Eliezer is now an older man, and he's a very important character within the household of Abraham, and of course he's free to come and go within Abraham's household. But he says, "I'm going to make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but you will go to my country, to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac." So go back to Mesopotamia. Actually, the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The place that we're probably looking at is in the borderlands between modern Iraq, modern Turkey, and modern Syria, up in the hill country, not too far from Haran. This is going to be the area where they're going. And Abraham's kinsmen are Amorites. We can count on Abraham's household, his ancestors, his family there, as all being still pagans and idolaters. Later on, we're going to see uh, the story of the household idols that come out with Rachel. Yeah, this is an interesting story. What is she doing with household idols? These people are still idolaters. So Rebecca, for all that we like Rebecca, is coming from a family of pagans. It says, "Swear to me that you won't take any one else." And the servant said to him, "Well, perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" So the question is, if she won't come here, should I take Isaac back to Mesopotamia? And Abraham said to it, "See it to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of your offspring, or from the land of my kindred, who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring, I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from that place. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, you'll be free from this oath. Only don't take my son back there." Now, he's very insistent. It says the land is really important, and the woman must come here. Traditionally, the bride would come to live in the household of the father. The son would make a place for the bride to live within the family compound, the household. So that this may be the beginning of that tradition. I don't know. But here Abraham says, "My son isn't going there. I don't want him to be in that environment, but I do want a wife from my own family." Now, later on, uh, Isaac is going to do the same thing with Jacob. Is that I want you to go to my father's household. Uh, and it doesn't quite work out there. Isaac ends up, or Jacob ends up going back to the ancestral homeland to find a wife. And he comes back with four, which is a little more than everybody bargained for. So he says to it goes on. If the woman won't follow, then you're free from your oath. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master and swore to him concerning the matter. Now, this is a very, very important, uh, very important trip. This very important errand for the servant. He is not a mere slave. For the most part, in the ancient Near East, people who were bond servants served for a certain length of time. They would sell themselves for enough to pay off debts, for example. Then, when their time was served as a servant, they could be free if they wanted to be free. The Old Testament has a provision that if a servant wants to stay with a master, there's a specific oath he can take, and he can be a servant in that household forever. So servitude in the Old Testament era was not necessarily a bad thing. It could be, and in some cultures it was. But within the Israeli tradition, it was not necessarily a bad thing. Uh, at any rate, we've got the servant going. So off he went, took 10 camels, along with camel drivers and other servants. He had a whole crew, and he departed. He had all sorts of choice gifts from his master. He arose, went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor, which would be Haran. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at that time of the evening, the time when the women go out to draw water. Okay, so here's a man that knows what he's looking for. He wants to talk to the women, and the place to find the women would be at the well. The jugs that the people carried water in were substantial size. The smallest we could hope for would be about 20 liters. That's a clay jug, which itself is heavy, and 20 liters of water would be carried either on the shoulder or on the top of the head. So as Rebecca comes out here, along with the other ladies, they're carrying these empty jugs, and they're going to fill these up and carry them back into town. Uh, this would be a significant physical feat for the ladies involved here. There's a lot of water, and so there they were. The time when the women go out, and he said, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham." Now, in that prayer, verse 12, there's a lot going on. Notice that he says, "Oh Lord." Now, this is all capitals. This means the name Yahweh is used. Now we know that that's what Moses put there. Uh, the servant may not have used that name, but I suspect he did. I think the name of God was known. When we see God revealing his name to Moses in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, that is almost certainly not the first time that the name of the Lord was put into common use amongst the Israelite people. Abraham probably knew the name. And Eleazar here probably also has known that name. So he prays, "O Lord," which is the name of God that is in use by believers. Eleazar was almost certainly a believer. Now he says, Yahweh, God of my master Abraham. I think he also means my God too. It's virtually certain that Eleazar is a believer in that household. It's almost certain. Please grant me success. Show your steadfast love to my master Abraham. The word steadfast love, I believe, is used first here in the Old Testament. There's a very, very important word used later on to describe the love of God. Steadfast love is a common translation. Uh, some of our translations use um, tender mercies, or even the worst of all, bowels of mercy. Uh, it's a formal familial love. The strongest relationship in the New Testament is not agape love, but philostorgoi love, the love of a mother. It is a very strong word. This is the love of God uh, by which he promises to stand with his people and never to let them go. We sometimes call this loyal love. The Hebrew word is chesed, okay, Hesed. It's uh, it's important to me that uh, this servant knows that word. Abraham has spoken of this. So this is a fairly sophisticated servant. I'm sure he's a believer. "Behold," he says, "I'm standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, Please let down your jar, that I may drink, and who shall say, Drink, and I will water your camels as well, let her be the one whom you've appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you've shown steadfast love to my master." Now, this is what I call an unlikely test. Okay, if I'm trying to discover the will of God, and I say to him, "Oh Lord, if it's your will that I buy this brand new high-powered sports car, without my wife's knowledge. Let me know by having the sun arise tomorrow morning. It's pretty sure that God's going to be on my side. But if I give him something difficult to do and he does it, then I know I've gotten a positive answer. So if you're ever going to do a thing like this, and I don't recommend it, we call it putting out the fleece, like Gideon did with God with his wet and dry fleece. We really shouldn't do that. Uh, that's called putting God to the test, and that's not a nice thing to do to God. But here, this servant says, uh, if this girl is willing to give me water and water my camels, then she's the one, and I will know that you've shown loyal love, steadfast love to my master. Before he had finished speaking, behold, a Hebrew way of saying, and look at this, lo and behold. It's the single word, hine. Behold, look at this, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. Aha, here comes Rebecca, who just happens to be the right family. Comes out with her water jar on her shoulder. And the young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known, which Eliezer couldn't have known at that time, but we have the detail. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. And then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. She's a nice, courteous young lady. She said, drink, my lord, as much as you'd like. And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking. Now, a camel, having crossed 700 miles of desert, is going to be thirsty. A camel could do that. A camel can go for days on end without a drink. But when it's time to drink, they definitely want to tank up. So at ancient Near Eastern wells, there would have been a stone trough capable of holding some thousands of liters, a lot of water. Uh, and typically, it would be the men of the city who would once in a while come out and make sure that that was full, especially if you knew there was a caravan coming soon. It's unusual for the women to meet an ongoing or an incoming caravan without the men present. To this day, that's still unusual. If you're approaching a Bedouin camp, the first people who will meet you are the men. To get around that, you can show up at the well at the time of day when you know the women will be out to get water. This is what Jesus did uh, uh, with the Samaritan woman at the well. He knew who he was after. And in the same way, Eleazar knew that he was targeting one of the women of this city, and he was praying that God would show him exactly the one. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. 10 camels are tanking up at this big trough, and all of them are drinking as quick as they can because they know when this is gone, there's not going to be any more for a while. So they're all drinking. And she's running back and forth, carrying this very heavy jar and dumping water. And the man, Eleazar, gazed at her in silence. In other words, he's dumbstruck. He can't even talk. He gazed at her in silence, having learned whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. He'd learned exactly what he prayed for. The woman will give me this, to drink, and she'll offer to take care of my camels. This is the one. And he was amazed that this all happened so quickly. And when the camels had finished drinking, the man took the gold ring weighing half a shekel, and 2 bracelets for her arms, weighing 10 gold shekels. Now this is a princely gift. This is a great deal of gold and silver. And he said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there a room in your father's house that my party and I might spend the night?" And she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom he bore to Nahor," the correct way of speaking of her lineage. And she added, "We have plenty of both straw and fodder and room to spend the night." The straw and the fodder show the place for the caravan to stay for the night will have room for their camels, room for all of the men, room for Eleazar. There's plenty of room in the stable. And that's normal. That's the way people took care of travelers in the ancient world. It's a very, very nice thing that she's doing. We've got plenty. And the man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord. Again, this is another use of a very important Old Testament word, hishtahava, means he bowed down before her and worshipped the Lord. He wasn't worshiping the young lady; he was worshiping God. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, Baruch Adonai, Elohei uh, uh, Baal Luam Avram." Okay, blessed be the God, the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. So now he joins steadfast love and faithfulness. God is the one who keeps his promises. Powerful statement here. "As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman." So this servant is a wise man. He knows that God has guided him in this journey, in the whole track, and all the way to this place. So Rebecca had a brother whose name was Laban. Oh, later on we're going to meet Laban again. Laban is a nice match for Jacob. There are a couple of con men. Now, Laban is clearly not a believer. So the brother is going to kind of take charge of affairs here. And he ran out toward the man to the spring, and as soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets, his eyes light up with dollar signs. And he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister. Thus the man spoke to me. He went to him, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. He said, "Come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? I've prepared the house and a place for the camels." And he probably actually had. The village would not have been very far from that spring, not nearly as far as this picture. And they would have seen the caravan come into town. And all of this is going very, very quickly. So the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels, straw and fodder for the camels, and there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. And then food was set before him to eat, and he said, "I will not eat until I've said what I have to say." And Laban said, "Speak on." He said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master," which Laban is very happy to hear. He's a rich man, and he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold, male servants and female servants, and camels and donkeys. Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when he was old, and to him he has given all he has. My master made me swear, saying, "You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but go to my father's house and to my clan to take a wife for my son." I said to my master, "Perhaps the woman will not follow me." And he said, "The Lord whom I've walked will send his angel with you to prosper your way. You shall take a wife for my son from my clan and from my father's house." and then you will be free from my oath if she will not come. Okay. And if they will not give her, you can come home. And I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, God of my master, if you're the one who's showing me, behold, I'm standing by the spring. Let the young lady who comes to draw water say, let me give you a little water, and I will also draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman. And before I had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder. She went down. She gave me to drink. She drew water also for my camels. You notice he's telling the whole story over again? This is very common in ancient Near Eastern literature. It makes the story a little bit longer, and it also makes it easier to memorize. And this began as a memory thing. At any rate, and I asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" And she told me, "Daughter of Bethuel, Near's son, Milcah, born to him." So I put her, gave there's a ring for her nose. So she got a ring in her nose, gold ring. She didn't put it on her finger; she put it on her nose. So I put a ring in her on her nose, and the bracelets on her arms, and I bowed my head and worshipped the Lord and blessed God, the God of my master Abraham, who has led me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you're going to show me steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, there's those words again. Tell me, and if not, tell me that I may turn to the right or to the left. And Laban and Bethuel answered. Now we come down to it. The thing has come from the Lord, who they know is Abraham's God. And we cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. So Rebecca is old enough to make this decision herself, and their tradition is that the girl has a voice in this. When Abraham's servant heard their word, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. The servant brought out jewelry of silver and gold and garments, gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank. They spent the night there. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." And her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." Now, this is a break with tradition. It is normal for a woman to have some time to prepare for the wedding that she knows is coming. She'll want the right dresses. She'll want the right ornaments. Whatever all women need to talk to their mothers about before they get married. Mom has probably put in a word here saying, "Can't you just give us a week or so?" And that may be why they've asked. But they said, we don't want to delay. The Eliezer says, "Don't make me wait." They said, "Let's call her and ask her." And they said to Rebecca, "Will you go?" And she said, "I will go." So they sent away Rebecca and their sister and her nurse, uh, a uh, a young woman who was the servant of Rebecca from her birth. It's very common, and Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebecca, and they said, "O sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s. May your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." Okay, very nice blessing. It reflects some of the blessings of God to Abraham. And then Rebekah and her young women arose. They rode on the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went away. Now, this is the cool thing at the end of it. We see all of this that uh, God is working in this whole thing. So it's a very romantic setting. It's very nice. And then Rebecca and her young women arose, or young woman, yeah, several, rode on the camels and followed the man. The servant took Rebecca and went his way. Now, Isaac had returned from Beer Lahai Roi, which is Beersheba, which is what we see here in the picture on the screen. And he had gone out. He was dwelling in the Negev, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, which is a good time to go out. The sun is going down, but in the desert it stays light for a long time, and it gets cooler, and you can think. And he lifted up his eyes and saw. He he took a good, careful look, and behold, the camels were coming. They over there. You guys see that? It seems like there's camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. And she said to her servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "Ah, it is Isaac, my master." Oh, isn't this nice? And so she took her veil and covered herself, this shy little thing. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So girl sees boy, boy sees girl, love at first sight, long sigh. And this is really the high point uh, of Isaac's career after the sacrifice. This is it. We see very little of the rest of Isaac's life. The next point we see is where Rebecca will be having the twins, and that's the only sin, or only children of Isaac and Rebecca that we know of. And we'll go next chapter. We'll start at chapter 25, but we're going to go on into the story of Jacob. So we'll finish it up. We'll finish 25 up next time, and then look at the genealogies of Abraham through Keturah, and then the genealogies of Ishmael, and then we'll take a look at the birth and the early years of Jacob. Jacob's a fascinating character, and some of his story is really worth studying, because what we're really looking at in all of this is how God intended to save the world by working through a broken family. And the family of Abraham is nothing if not broken. They fall short of the ideals in so many ways. And yet the messianic line is now going to go on through this this line from Abraham. All of those years before, it had come through a line that is mixed. And now we have a family to watch for really the rest of biblical history, through Isaac and then on to Jacob. So we'll get together again next week. I'm going to stop the share there, and we see what we've got here. Yeah, okay, good. Um, Thanks all for coming. I really do appreciate it. It's really nice to get the group back together again. I was telling my students just a week ago that we're at a point in the history of the world where it is actually possible for us as modern Christians to reach the uttermost parts of the earth. And every Wednesday, we prove that by connecting three continents. Uh, here I am in Idaho, and there you are in Italy and in the Philippines, and we can enjoy one another's fellowship. Thank you all for being there. Uh, love you all bunches. Let me see if I can unmute. I want to say goodbye and hear you all talk again. But bye bye for now. We will see you next Wednesday, same time, same place. And I look forward to our time together then. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you for your
Thank you, Dr.
strong
John.
Thank
prayers.
you.
Yeah, love having you
How
there.
to t-
Hey, Oscar, thanks for
Uh,
those receipts. I appreciate getting that. My accountant back east likes to see those things. Thanks, now. Ciao, ciao. Bye to
Oh,
everybody.
bye. Bye, everyone.
Okay, let's see if I can make this go
That's it.
away. Yeah, I can end it way down here. Okay. Let's see if I can make it end. Yeah. Da, 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 da. Ciao, ciao.